Sugar and Spikes is a science-backed and semi-sarcastic mental health podcast for a new type of business leader. Mental health concerns are occasionally addressed, but this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any condition, mental, physical, metaphysical, or otherwise. That's a job for your doctor or therapist, not a podcast. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
Doing intros or anything?
Yeah, I guess I'll lead in. Welcome to the third installment of Quarantine Edition, the event that brought us back earlier than we expected to get back together to record, and it seems to be a bit more necessary than anyone expected.
Yeah.
So today we want to talk about, kind of where Tammy and I both are, and I think where a lot of people are in general, where we're over it.
Yeah.
Like in the most fundamental way. And I think when we talk about being over it, that breaks down into so many different things, right? Like frustration, anger, almost a sense of like hopelessness, like when is this going to be done?
Yeah.
You know, like no end in sight. So even just saying the topic this week is what to do when you're over it, you know, it's not as simple as that. And then adding in the idea of burnout or being over it when you can't use your coping skills. And that brings us to this episode.
Yeah. I don't know. It was a rough week.
I think we're all feeling defeated, frustrated, angry, like just a lot of negative difficult. I don't even want to say negative in terms of, putting a value judgment on it. But a lot of really hard feelings because this time is hard. And one thing I will say is I've wanted to shout it from the rooftop recently. Anyone that says they are thriving during quarantine, anyone who says that they don't have anxiety or fear or any difficult emotion to navigate during this time, they're either delusional or they're not paying attention.
Well, in deep, deep denial.
Yeah. At some point, denial becomes delusional.
Fair. So it's so funny because this is going to seem like it doesn't relate, but for some reason, so I was in the military, and I don't really think about that part of my life very often. Like sometimes it's not because I didn't like it or I didn't get anything out of it. I'm kind of in a different place.
Well, like people, it's so disconnected from you. People that know you for months or even a year or so don't know it.
Oh yeah, no.
Like
no, they don't.
It's not a thing.
No.
With a lot of people, it's a thing. With you, it's not.
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the thing.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about as you were talking, and it's been coming up in random ways because we were watching an episode of Bear Grylls because that's what we do now because we have Disney Plus. And they were doing a rappel. And for some reason I was like, oh yeah, I've done that. And we got onto the subject of boot camp. And I think about this kind of compared to what we're going through now, because it's kind of like you're to the end of your rope. Like you don't know what you're going to fucking do anymore. You're having all these hard feelings and you just feel, you just feel like really broken down.
Mm-hmm.
But boot camp's designed to do that. It's designed to break you down and kind of make you into a different version of yourself. I'm not going to say better, but a different version of yourself. And so I've been thinking about this, and like, we've been in our houses now like a month.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm pretty broken down. Like, I think it's going to remake everyone in some way or another into a different version of themselves. But that tends to be pretty painful.
Well, I think there are different levels, right? Like, I mean, I would say I'm with you in the like scheme of things in terms of being broken down. Like, I'm normally not one to ask for help. I'm normally not one to put up like very distinct boundaries. Like when like right before we started recording, and the thing that prompted us to record was I told Tammy a story where like we went for a walk today and we were socially distancing, like we were being appropriate, but saw a neighbor, and this couple asked like, oh, how are things going with work and everything? And I was just like, I'm not talking about that. Like, just this like really hard line, because I'm not in a space to like deal with things.
Yeah, to have that discussion. Yeah.
And like asking for help from like family and things like that. Like, it's just, that's not what I do. And I've been in a lot of really bad situations, and I haven't done that before. You know, like I haven't, like, this is a different response to a situation because the situation is different, but this is a different response than anything I think I've ever, you know, exhibited historically.
Right.
And I think we're all getting to that point in different ways.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means. I don't know if it needs to mean anything.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, I don't know. It's really the journey of things, and making meaning out of it kind of happens when you start to look back at it a little bit more. I think we're so in it. We all feel just like we're in survival mode, and like the punches keep coming. Like that thing I sent you yesterday. You'll have to put that with this. But like, everyone's kind of feeling like punched in the face by the universe right now. And it's just hard. It's just hard.
Like, even like going to record this, I was just like, I don't necessarily know what to talk about. And there is this kind of space, I think, where there needs to be leaders saying, like, it's okay to be burned out. And I feel like we've talked about that in, you know, the earlier quarantine episodes, like feel your feelings and things like that. But
I mean, that's our theme. That's kind of our jam.
It's really what we preach day in and day out. But I think like right now we're all in a space where it's like survive. Like, if you can get through the next day, okay.
Yeah.
You know,
or to the smallest thing, like maybe I'm going to get till dinner.
Exactly. Like things like that. And I also think that there's a difference between feeling your feelings and living your life versus feeling your feelings like on a different level where like that is living your life.
Yeah. So you can't get outside of it.
Yeah. Like managing your emotions while doing XYZ versus managing your emotions, and that is your day.
I mean, I feel like people throw out managing your emotions means you're not feeling difficult emotions, right? So kind of like people who have anxiety are like, I can't deal. And I'm like, you are dealing. Like,
yeah, you're existing. You're surviving, you're breathing, you're talking about this.
Right.
You're dealing.
Right. So dealing doesn't mean like put on a brave face and go about your day. Even if you do put on the brave face, it's at least admitting or owning what is going through you, what you're feeling in your body and your mind and your emotions. And that doesn't mean you have to show it to everyone either. Like, I'm starting to hate the English language because we talk about acceptance, which sounds like we mean like we like it or it's
Like
good.
joyful, thank you
Yeah.
for this gift. I will accept. I graciously accept this award.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like negative emotions, right? So that tends to stop it. Even my dog is feeling strong emotions right
Mhm.
now. Lay down. Oh my God. You just need me, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So, he's owning his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, buddy. Not to be outdone.
No.
That's funny.
Penny, come here. Penelope Lane, come on. Come here. Come on. Come on, Penny. Okay.
Just black blobs on the screen.
I mean, it's funny that like we get onto this idea of acceptance because I think there, like what I've been experiencing and what I've been navigating is the idea of radical acceptance, and like you don't have to like it.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. Like I know a couple people absolutely hate that phrase or hate that saying. I've personally kind of always been a fan of it because it's like the situation is the situation.
Yeah.
As much as you want to fight the situation, you're not going to change your external world that you're interacting with. The only thing you can change is your response,
Mm-hmm.
So I think like radical acceptance isn't it's not a joyful moment. It's not an easy thing to come to. It's
No.
really really hard because when we're talking about radical acceptance, we're talking about giving up so much power. And for so much of our audience, I know we're all very much like type A,
Yeah.
overachiever. We will control for anything and everything we can possibly think of. And right now, almost nothing is in our control.
Right. So it's funny that you bring up radical acceptance because it's like my master skill that I teach folks. I don't
Mhm.
know how to really put it, but like if somebody said, okay, Tammy, you can only have one thing or two things that you ever teach clients, what would they be?
Mhm.
And it would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you can ground in the moment,
Mhm.
and it would be radical acceptance.
Mhm.
Those are the two things I would teach.
Mhm.
Because nothing else will get you to the point of change in a better way.
Mhm.
Because the thing about change is the paradox of change is that you have to accept that things are the way they are. Like
Mhm.
this is reality
Mhm.
before you can start to make any changes. So like we push it away, we try to imagine it's not happening. We're like, that's not happening. We try to ignore it. We try and fight it. We try all these different things.
Mhm.
And in the end, it comes to this acceptance. But again, the word acceptance is tied up with liking. And you're
Mhm.
right, it has nothing to do with that. Like, I
Mhm.
don't like that I've been shut in this house for a month. And I have, and that's not in my control. So,
Maybe it's acknowledging, radical
yes. Oh,
acknowledgement.
I like that. I like that.
Like I think we all have those people like, I acknowledge your existence. I'm not dealing with you.
Right.
And with like our emotions and situations, I acknowledge this. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z,
But even that would be more healthy. Even that
Mhm.
would be more like, I recognize that this is going on. I'm choosing not to deal with it.
Mhm.
That's very different from there's nothing wrong.
Mhm.
Like those are very different places to be.
Mhm.
I
I
can't
think
imagine anyone who is loving this. I'd be surprised.
I mean, you saw that thing from Justin Bieber who was like, it's not my fault I worked hard and get to quarantine in a mansion.
Okay, because the rest of us don't work hard.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
okay.
It was very problematic. I think
so many ways.
I think he kind of, isolated a lot of his fan base right there. But I think I also think I read something online that was really insightful because so much of the messaging and almost propaganda around all of this is we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And that's fundamentally not true.
Right.
I think that goes back to the same concept of, well, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. When we talk about like races and ethnicities, like if you don't see color, you ignore someone's experience. If we're all in the same boat, you are ignoring the differences in what is happening to people.
Right. We're not in a
And-
mansion in Montana.
Right. Neither of us are in like a luxurious mansion with all the extra spare rooms, and neither of us like, yeah. So not in that. And I think just in terms of like, I think the most fundamental difference that's oddly become politicized, which is unfortunate, is the idea of put people back to work, keep people isolated for safety. And I think even that area of dichotomy is doing harm because there's this assumption of, well, you want to go back to work because you don't care. You want to keep people locked up because you don't care. No, that's not true. It's just, I think that the loudest voices are the ones that have maybe either the most privilege or the most need on either side.
Yeah.
And this, again, like, I guess propaganda is the best word I have around we're all in the same boat, that's doing harm because it's fueling this idea of if someone doesn't agree with you, then it's because of this reason. Like it makes
Right.
it very, very basic, and not nuanced. And everyone's experience is nuanced. We are all learning about everyone else's human experience on a heightened level right now, and it's an interesting point in civilization. Like, I think when all of this started, there was like this novelness around, well, this is a once in a generation thing and stuff, but we're really kind of getting to the heart of the matter and it's becoming almost deeper. And everyone's emotions and nerves are fried, so differences are becoming more and more disparate and distinct.
Yeah. It's highlighting all the things that are wrong with this system.
Yeah.
And all the good things too.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them, but like good things too. Like there are people coming together. There are people supporting one another.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's unfortunate that like the people who are saying like we're all in the same boat together have a million times more resources than the people they're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Like you talked about Justin Bieber, and then there was that whole thing about like that fiasco with the Imagine thing, like let's all be together.
Oh yeah, that was so tone deaf.
That was a fucking mess. And then like Steve Mnuchin being like, yeah, $1,200, like turning into Lucille Bluth before our eyes, and like it just highlights and puts in like complete like the stark way that like people don't know the general people's experience, right? Like even the statement like I worked really hard so here I am with my mansion and my millions, like people who are working 2 jobs, have kids, like single parent, like they're working hard too. We're all working hard.
Yeah, no one woke up and said I'm going to dick around with my life.
Right.
Which goes back to another one of like the things that we, will shout from the rafters forever is like people are generally doing the best that they can with what they have and with what they know. Like, I don't think there's, I mean, I'm sure there's a couple, but in general, I don't think there are many people that wake up and say, I'm going to fuck up my life today.
I
You
mean, you
know?
can be self-destructive, but I kind of feel like that's not like the flavor of what's going on right
Yeah.
now.
And I think even the verbiage, the general population, I feel like that can even be harmful because I feel like you and I would both identify as the general population and we have very different experiences.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's making space for the nuance
Yeah.
and really like letting voices be heard. And I think that that is one thing that is a positive that's come out of this is we are seeing kind of the creators rise up, and there's more of an audience because people have made their way through all of Netflix.
Right.
And, you know, things like
Trust me,
that.
I'm looking. It's been rough.
So, but like there's also privilege in that. Like I read this really interesting article from like the Wall Street Journal and it was like there's this class of people that are bored with Netflix and there's this class of people that haven't slept because they don't know where they're getting food.
Right.
You know, and that both are stresses, and as much as I feel like our guts say, well, one is worse, we can't put that value judgment on it because you don't. This goes back to the like people judging, well, what's an essential trip
Right.
discussion,
Yeah.
you know, like if I'm going to go buy plants and that keeps me from doing something else stupid like buying drugs or something, then that's
buy
an
the
essential trip.
Yep.
That's an essential trip. If like
Yeah.
looking at clothes keeps someone safe from an abusive partner, that's an essential trip.
Right.
You know, so
I love that you said that.
I think like the Netflix discussion and things like that, like, yeah, we see the class dichotomies very clearly and saying your stress isn't as big as my stress. And I've 100% been that person. Like the other day I called you on it. I was like, your stress is this, mine is this. I need you to be quiet. Like, I think that's okay on a one-to-one level,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but in these like larger conversations and in not, you know, like those ride or die relationships,
Yeah.
you're discounting and discrediting a lot of stuff.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, you're right. Everybody's experience of this is different. And I think there's the level of privilege where, okay, if I don't work, I'm good. I'm at a ranch. Like, I'm in my mansion. I don't have to work. But for those of us who do, and those of us who support people, and those of us who support ourselves, and like, these are real stressors in a lot of different ways. And you can still be stressed about those things and be bored with the shit on Netflix. And then because I like what you said, I feel like it kind of all gets dumbed down to this level of like 90s diversity discussions where it's like everyone's a melting pot and we're all in this together. And it's like, no, I get that we're all in this together. And like my experience is my experience and I need you to understand that. Like I appreciate the sentiment of support. I just think it isn't happening in that way, like in reality. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, I think there's a difference between we're in this together versus even the idea of we're doing the best we can. Like going off of last week's episode, if Karen comes up and yells at me while I'm like buying my chicken nuggets, yeah, we're all in this together. I don't even know what that means in that situation. But if I enter into that interaction or like experience that through this, well, Karen's doing the best she can, I'm going to sigh, be stressed out and like mad about it, but walk away and not go into it, you know?
Because it's not
like,
really personal.
Exactly. Like, I think very few things that are happening right now are truly personal. Like, we're all snapping and reacting and moving through this experience again, like in a heightened state.
Yeah.
And so having grace not only for ourselves and like giving ourselves space, but having grace for others. And like along with that, like it's not giving them a pass, but it's acknowledging like everyone is more stressed, and how do we account for that? Like I've noticed I've been much more clear with my communication and much more direct and shorter with things.
Mm.
You know, like my example with my neighbor, I feel like is a very clear example. I don't think 3 months ago, even if I had like the worst day ever, if someone was like, how's work going? I don't think I'd be like, I'm not talking about that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But it's just like, what do I have space for in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have space to communicate with you across the street, but I don't have space to pretend like everything is okay.
Right. So that like that social nicety like kind of
Mhm.
isn't there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like
where
I
you
could
come up with some
tell.
nothing thing to say that
Yeah.
doesn't really say anything, but you feel like you answered their question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could tell that they were just like caught off guard with like that honest or transparent answer. They were like, okay, fair enough. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not going to lie because I don't have the energy for
Do you
that.
think then it just strips back everything to like how you can do everything in its simplest form?
Yeah. And
Like,
I
I'm not going
think,
to have this back and forth with somebody about my work. Like, I'm not doing that.
yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely reduces small talk. And on the other side of stuff, I think it is building relationships. Like I've had a couple text conversations with people that I would say were more acquaintances
Mhm.
than anything. And then in like text and DMs and stuff, like it got really real really fast.
Yeah.
You know, like I was DMing someone the other day and like because of how they show up on social media and where I am, like they asked, "Oh, well, how are things going?" And I was like, "Honestly, I like absolutely lost my shit, blah blah blah, all these things." And that's not an answer I would have given someone a few months ago, you know,
Right.
but I feel like this is a little contradictory, but because I know we are all having this experience together.
It's like we
We
all
all
have
have
trauma bonds on one level or another.
exactly, which maybe is what people mean when they say we're all in this together,
Yeah.
but you could use some different language around it.
But that's this whole idea of like the shitty English language.
Mhm.
And, this isn't really like a linguistics thing, but
Mhm.
it's just more like I think the ideas that are tied up in our words, it makes it hard to say what we really mean. I think
Mhm.
it's true. All the people in our circles, so I won't say all of us, but I'll say like the people in our circles, all of us, um, it is kind of like trauma bonds, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And like to that degree, things get really real really fast,
Mhm.
and the connection code comes much quicker
Mhm.
also.
Yeah. I
And
would
it's not
agree
a
with
bad
that.
thing. It's not a bad thing, you
I
know, just a different way of connecting.
I mean, I don't want this episode to be like all doom and gloom and say we're all exhausted and we're all done and
I don't
every
even think that saying we're exhausted is doom and gloom,
yeah,
but
it's not necessarily a bad thing.
I can't put a gloss on it and be like, I'm good, because that's just not the case right now. And it
Well,
isn't doom and gloom. It's just like, that's how I'm feeling. So,
yeah.
you know,
And I think like to your point with like boot camp and stuff, like being in the same kind of emotional exhaustion with
mhm.
people, like that's where you get to know people on a different level and have those I don't want to say trauma bonds because at some point it becomes like a cultural bond. I think for as much fighting as is going on or like arguing or miscommunication or whatever you want to call it is going on kind of amongst the masses, amongst social media and the people that you are friends with but don't actually know.
Yeah.
As much as that is happening, I think that relationships that exist at the end of this, like, will be that much stronger. And I think a lot of people will have connections that weren't expected. You know,
Right.
like, I think we are learning how to be human in a different way.
I think it's like learning to be human and vulnerable. Like,
Mhm.
I think maybe trauma bonds isn't the right word for it. I feel like that has kind of a negative connotation. But it becomes like almost an immediate opportunity to have support
Mhm.
from people who aren't necessarily deeply involved in our lives.
Mhm.
And I think we put a lot of value here on like having boundaries until it's quote unquote appropriate. And then you can be vulnerable with the
Mhm.
person, right? This idea of kind of like this stepwise thing that,
Like weeding them out.
yeah.
Mhm.
So you finally get to like the three and you're
Mhm.
like, okay, that's us. Like, here we are. But I think like this is really an opportunity
Mhm.
for us to be like, okay, maybe that kind of stepwise weeding out process isn't
Mhm.
really going to be what we need to do right now. And
Mhm.
so we're kind of like getting real a little more quicker and receiving support back and supporting them at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, so it's really
Yeah.
it's a really unique place to be.
Mhm. And I think it's interesting because it does open the opportunity for other types of like relationships or to connect with people that you normally wouldn't connect with.
Yeah.
You know, like all the calls that I've been on for the last 3 weeks, they've been so casual, if only because the first 4 minutes are spent talking about working from home and the quarantine situation. We all have this like similar experience, but also like my personal experience has been there have been a couple people where I've texted outside of my close circle
Mhm.
because I know that they have had similar experiences and like the need for a different perspective.
Yeah.
You know, like I think my experience so far is like every day is the same. All interactions are the same. If this goes the way I think it's going to go one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. I need to I need to reach out. I need to like have something different. It needs to be, you know, something
Something new.
else.
Yeah.
Um and there's this, you know, kind of like socially acceptable moment to text or reach out to someone else because of the situation, like that makes new bonds,
Yeah.
you know, and I think people are more open to that.
Yeah.
um I don't know, it's weird, it's interesting.
Right? It's like a whole new whatever, whole new
I think
way
it
of
was
being in the world.
there was a I think it was the Newsboys. They were a Christian pop band and they had a song called New Way to Be Human, and that's just like that's what I keep thinking about.
Yeah.
And that's going to be stuck in my head now. Um but yeah,
Maybe that's better. Maybe it's better to have that being the thing you're ruminating on.
yeah.
Not like you, but like all of us, you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um so I think this episode took a turn that I wasn't expecting,
As it
but
always does.
I think it's good because these are the conversations that need to happen. And I mean, we tout our expertise and knowledge, but at this moment in time, no one has any idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And the most we can do is be decent to each other and give people some space where if maybe they're not completely decent, like if Karen yells at you while you're buying your chicken nuggets, like if you're not harmed, you know,
Yeah.
then give them grace.
Yeah. I mean, I think of like kind of my approach is that I have lots of like expertise to offer.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say if you strip that all back, what do I offer? And I offer empathy and
Mm-hmm.
compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So when you strip everything back, we get to this point and it's like, I can treat people with empathy and compassion
Mm-hmm.
and grace, like you were saying. So like, that's kind of where we are too.
Mm-hmm. Like, it sucks. People don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think in almost any country, politics aside,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. I mean, conversations over yelling are always good. And knowing when to tap out and say, I don't have the space for this, or I thought I had the space for this and it's done, you know, and just like giving yourself what you need, because people are doing that even if they don't realize it.
Yeah. So
When people are being rude to you and hostile, it's because they see a space to take control and that's what they need in the moment. And I'm not saying anyone has a right to take control from you like that. I'm not co-signing on that. We're all reacting and responding in ways, and it's our duty, it's our responsibility to ourselves to create those other walls. Like if someone's yelling at me, or like, I don't know why right now, like my thought is like laser words. If they're shooting like laser words at me, like it's my job to either get out of that situation or put up a blocker and say, I'm not okay with this. Could like phrase it like X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You know, like I think we all, as much as we are going to end up needing to relearn how we interact with society in a physical manner, we're also relearning how to interact with society on an interpersonal level as well.
Agreed. I got nothing.
On that note, be decent to each other, everyone, especially yourselves, while we get through this, because I've said it once, said it 1,000 times, we're all seriously doing the best we can right now.
Absolutely.
All right. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll be back in a week or two. I feel like we're getting to that space where we can start to kind of commit to something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're giving like 3% more commitment than last week. And hey, this is the second week in a row. Again, we weren't expecting to be back. This was going to be a June or July re-entry into the world, but
here we are
back early.
The brave new world.
Yep. We'll talk to everyone later. Bye.
Bye, friends. Be well.